Real Supernatural Tales. Episode 1. The Beginning Welcome. My name is Ilton, and from a very young age I realized I could see what many others cannot. You might not believe what I'm about to tell you, but I promise you this. After hearing this story, you'll start looking at the world with different eyes. What you're about to hear isn't fiction. It's not a horror movie. These are real experiences. I lived in a world where the visible and invisible cross in ways most people never imagined possible. And it all began when I was just 12 years old, in a small town in the countryside of Rio Grande do Sul, Brazil. It was a town called Independencia, one of those quiet places where everyone knows each other, where houses have big backyards and the silence of the night is broken only by crickets. My uncle Ivo lived there, and with him lived his cousin, Juanita. Juanita wasn't an ordinary person. She had a gift or a connection with something that few can access. She was a psychic. People came from far away to consult with her, from other cities, other states, even other countries. Famous people, simple people, all seeking the same thing, answers about the future and solutions to problems that seemed impossible to solve. I always heard stories about her. They said she had helped find missing persons, that she predicted accidents before they happened, that she knew things no one could possibly know. But for me at that time, they were just stories, things adults talked about that I didn't really understand. My mother, Nilza, was always very serious when she spoke about Juanita. I remember her looking me in the eyes, with that expression only mothers have when they want to make sure you're paying attention, and saying, "Ilton, never go into her room. Do you hear me? Never." That room was a mystery. It was always closed, and when there were consultations, I saw people enter nervously and leave with expressions I couldn't decipher. Some cried, others left in silence, staring at nothing. It was as if something profound had happened in there. Something that changed people. I never questioned my mother. I never had the curiosity to disobey. Until one day everything changed. It was an ordinary Saturday. My mother and Uncle Ivo needed to go out to handle something in town. I stayed at the house, playing in the backyard, when I heard Juanita's voice calling me from inside. "Ilton, come here." I stopped. I felt a chill in my stomach. It wasn't exactly fear, but it was as if I knew something important was about to happen. I entered the house, and there she was, standing in the doorway of that room, the forbidden room. She looked at me with a soft expression, almost maternal, and said, "Come in. I want to show you something." My heart raced. I remembered my mother's words, but something in Juanita's voice made me trust her. So I entered. The room was simple, much simpler than I had imagined. There was a desk, papers, a pen, and a chair. Nothing more. No candles, no mystical symbols, nothing you'd see in movies. Just a normal room with a woman who had an extraordinary gift. Juanita sat at the desk and gestured for me to sit in the chair across from her. She picked up the pen and a blank sheet of paper, and then, without saying a word, she began to write. But it wasn't normal writing. Her hand moved quickly across the paper as if someone were guiding it. She didn't look at what she was writing. Her eyes were distant, as if she were listening to something only she could hear. The pen danced across the paper with impressive speed, filling line after line with words I couldn't read from where I sat. After a few minutes, she stopped. She put down the pen and looked at me with an expression I'll never forget. It was a mixture of surprise and concern. "Ilton," she said softly, "I need to tell you some things. Things about you that no one knows. Things that only you have lived." I swallowed hard. What could she possibly know about me? She began to read what she had written, and what came out of her mouth left me frozen. She spoke about intimate things from my childhood, about times when I was alone and thought no one was watching, about fears I had never shared with anyone, about dreams I had that I didn't even remember telling my mother. And then she said something that made my blood run cold. "When you were 8 years old, you had an illness, a urinary infection. They gave you a medicine that made your urine turn blue. You were scared. You thought something was very wrong with you, but you didn't want to worry your mother even more." I couldn't speak. How could she know that? It was such a specific detail, something I had never told anyone. I had kept that fear to myself, watching the toilet water turn that strange blue color every time I went to the bathroom, thinking maybe I was dying but not wanting to make my mother worry, because she already had so many problems. How do you know that?" I managed to whisper. She smiled gently. "I don't know, Ilton. I just write what I'm told to write." "Who tells you?" I asked, my voice trembling. "You'll understand soon," she said, and continued. She spoke about my future, about things that seemed impossible at the time. She said I would study law, that I would enter university in a unique way, without even needing to take the entrance exam, that I would only need to write my name. I almost laughed. At 12 years old, university seemed so far away, and the idea of entering without an exam? That sounded absurd. In Brazil, everyone knew you had to pass difficult entrance exams to get into university. There was no other way. But Juanita was serious. "You'll see," she said. "Everything I'm telling you will come to pass. Remember this day." And then, something happened that changed everything. As she spoke, I felt a presence in the room. It was a strange sensation, like when you feel someone watching you but you can't see them. I looked around, trying to understand what I was feeling, and then I saw it. Behind Juanita, standing perfectly still, was a figure. It had a human form, with arms crossed over its chest. But there was something different about it. It wasn't quite solid, but it wasn't transparent either. It was there, occupying space, real in a way that defied explanation. What shocked me most were its eyes. They were looking directly at me, not at Juanita, at me. My body froze. I couldn't move, couldn't speak. The figure tilted its head slightly, as if studying me, analyzing me, and then it spoke, not with a voice I could hear with my ears, but with words that appeared directly in my mind. "He can see." Juanita stopped mid-sentence. Her face went pale. She turned slowly, looking at the space where the figure stood, and then looked back at me with wide eyes. "Ilton," her voice was barely a whisper. Can you see him?" I nodded slowly, unable to take my eyes off the figure. She stood up so quickly that her chair fell backward. Her hands were shaking. "You can see him," she repeated, not as a question this time, but as a statement filled with disbelief and something else. Fear, respect. "Who is he?" I managed to ask, my voice barely audible. Juanita took a deep breath, trying to compose herself. "He's been with me since I was 16 years old. He's the one who tells me things, the one who guides my hand when I write, the one who knows what I cannot know." "But what is he?" I insisted. She looked at me for a long moment before answering. "He's a spirit, Ilton, from the spiritual realm. He has knowledge of things beyond our understanding. And in all these years, in all the consultations I've done, you're the first person who has ever been able to see him." The figure remained motionless, still watching me. I didn't feel threatened exactly, but I felt exposed, as if every thought I had was being read, every secret revealed. "Why can I see him?" I asked. Juanita sat back down, her hands still trembling slightly. "Because you have a gift, Ilton. A sensitivity to the spiritual world that very few possess. This changes everything." From that day forward, my life was never the same. I began to see things. Not all the time, not everywhere, but in moments I didn't expect. Shadows that moved when they shouldn't. Figures standing in corners that disappeared when I blinked. Whispers in empty rooms. I didn't tell my mother what happened. Something inside me knew she would worry, that she would try to protect me in ways that might close off this new perception I had. So I kept it to myself, processing everything alone. Years passed. I grew up, went to school, lived a relatively normal life. But the memory of that day never left me. And Juanita's prediction about law school? It came true in the most unexpected way. When it was time to enter university, Brazil had just implemented a new system called ENEM, a national exam that would allow students to enter universities using their scores instead of taking individual entrance exams. I took the ENEM, got a good score, and applied to law school. The process was simple. I filled out the application, used my ENEM score, and was accepted. I didn't have to take the traditional entrance exam. Just like Juanita had predicted years before, I entered university essentially by just writing my name and using a score I already had. When I realized what had happened, I felt a chill run down my spine. She had been right. Impossibly, inexplicably right. Over the years, I witnessed Juanita solve impossible cases. I remember one in particular that still haunts me to this day. A young woman had disappeared from a neighboring town. Her family was desperate, the police had no leads, and days were passing without any sign of her. The family, as a last resort, came to consult with Juanita. I was there that day, now older, in my late teens. I sat in the corner of the room while Juanita worked. She wrote quickly, as always, her hand moving across the paper with that familiar urgency. When she finished, she looked at the family with sad eyes and began to describe a location. A rural area near a river, a specific tree, a particular bend in the road. She described the exact spot where they would find the young woman, but then she said something that made everyone in the room go silent. "You'll find her tomorrow afternoon around 3 o'clock. But I'm sorry, she's no longer with us." The family left in tears, desperate but clinging to hope that maybe Juanita was wrong about that last part. The next day, the news spread through town like wildfire. They had found the young woman exactly where Juanita described, at exactly 3 in the afternoon, in the exact position she had detailed. Everything matched perfectly. And heartbreakingly, Juanita had been right about everything. How could she know? How could anyone know such specific details about something that had already happened but that no one else knew about? These questions haunted me. It was during these experiences that I began to understand a deeper truth, a truth that many people struggle with or refuse to accept. The spiritual realm is real. There are forces, entities, energies, whatever you want to call them, that exist beyond what our physical eyes can see. Some of these forces have knowledge, some have power, some have intentions we can't fully understand. But here's what I learned, and this is crucial. Just because something has power doesn't mean it has ultimate power. Just because something knows things doesn't mean it knows everything. And just because something exists in the spiritual realm doesn't mean it has your best interests at heart. Juanita worked with a spirit. That spirit had knowledge, had abilities, could see things hidden from normal perception, but it was still limited. It was still part of a hierarchy, part of a system that, I would later understand, is ultimately under the authority of something much greater. I grew up in a Christian home. My mother always taught me about God, about faith, about prayer. But experiencing the supernatural firsthand gave me a perspective that most people never have. I saw that the opposition, the forces that work against good, they do have real power. This isn't a fairy tale. These things exist, and they can influence our reality. But I also learned something more important. God has all power. Complete, ultimate, sovereign power. Everything else exists only because He allows it. Every spirit, every entity, every force in the spiritual realm operates under His authority, whether they acknowledge it or not. This realization didn't come all at once. It came through years of experiences, through witnessing both darkness and light, through seeing the limitations of even the most powerful spiritual manifestations. Today, I'm 43 years old. I've lived more than 3 decades since that first experience in Juanita's room, and I've decided it's time to share everything. Every vision, every encounter, every battle between the natural and supernatural that I've witnessed. Why now? Because I believe these stories need to be told, not to scare people, not to sensationalize the supernatural, but to open eyes to the reality that exists beyond what most people perceive, to show that faith isn't blind belief in things unseen, but rather trust in things that are very real, but exist in a dimension most people never access. What you've heard today is just the beginning. In the episodes to come, I'll share experiences that will challenge everything you think you know about the world. Stories of encounters with entities that shouldn't exist according to conventional understanding. Moments when the barrier between our world and the spiritual realm became so thin that I could step through it. Cases where prayer changed impossible situations in ways that defy natural explanation. But I'll also share the struggles, the fears, the times when I questioned my own sanity. Because this gift, or curse, or whatever you want to call it, hasn't always been easy to carry. The supernatural is real. The spiritual realm is active. And whether you believe it or not doesn't change the fact that it exists and operates around you every single day. I am living proof of this reality. And through these episodes, I hope to help you understand that there's so much more to this world than what meets the eye. If this story resonated with you, if something inside you recognized truth in what I shared, then subscribe to this channel, because what comes next will leave you speechless. The journey into the supernatural has only just begun. Thank you for listening, and remember, keep your eyes open. You never know what you might see. End of episode 1. Total word count 2,800 words.